Welcome to Glassbreakers Café, the podcast where we meet with impactful leaders to get their wisdom and insight on the future, leadership, and career development. Our goal is to inspire you and empower you to live an unlimited and smart future by breaking free from limiting beliefs, firefightings, and the invisible walls of our society. I'm your host, Cindy Montgenie, future work expert, diversity accelerator, executive coach, and international speaker. Welcome to Glassbreakers Café, a space to meet with impactful leaders and to get their insights on the future, inclusive leadership and career development. Our special guest today is Brigette Lumpkins. Welcome, Brigette.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy.
And Brigette, you're super young, but at this moment you have already built an interesting career. So I would love you to share with us the highlights of your career journey so we can know you better.
It's so funny you say super young. I wouldn't say super young, definitely young, but not super young. I originally started off with an interest in being a psychotherapist. And so I started a PhD. My educational path was to earn a PhD in clinical psychology, straight away after I graduated from college. And that's where I started. But I came to realize while I was in that course of study that while I found it intellectually stimulating, and still do continuously find the psychology to be the most interesting thing I could have possibly studied, so I don't regret it, but that I didn't actually want to be a therapist. That is a very challenging, taxing job, and I think that's come to the fore these days when the demand for that service is so great. It's just a very taxing job emotionally, but I wanted to do something more business-oriented, but because I had spent so much time studying and doing a more academic university sort of PhD career track, I had to pivot. And so I took a series of roles, in sales, basically, to explore industries and functions and just learn a little bit about what it was I wanted to do. So I worked in media in a sales role for the Miami New Times, which is now owned by Village Voice Media. I worked for a brief period for an internet startup. I worked in big pharma for several years, and then I sort of sharpened the pencil on what I wanted to do and went to business school. Went to Wharton, got my MBA, and went to Wall Street shortly thereafter, also in a sales role because psychology is the perfect background for any sales job. And I was on the trading floor there, covering big hedge funds and pension plans and other long-only managers for their European equity stock exposure. And then spent some time raising capital after I was done with the trading floor for a private equity fund of funds that's very well known in the business, Hamilton Lane, and then moved back to Miami to start my own shop, raising capital independently for fund managers, smaller, newer fund managers independently. And that was a really great job, but I kind of got recruited by Goldman Sachs while I was doing that. And so I went into the private client business because I was very curious about that. And still, even though it sounds like I've done all these different things, it's always been this thread of being in a client facing and a client acquisition or client growth mode or role. And so I was at Goldman, and while I was there, I was approached by a client from my Lehman and Barclays days to raise capital again for his new fund that he was launching, which, as you recall, is kind of right up my alley. That's what I was trying to do independently before. So I left Goldman to do that. And I did that for a couple of years, and that was a great ride. But he decided to close down the fund. And along that process, I decided to hop off that sort of volatile train of fund managers and go into the service provider end of the business. And that's how I ended up where I am now at EisnerAmper, but still in a capital, a capital acquisition, client acquisition role, revenue generating role.
Yeah, like super rich and interesting career. And what is great, like you were mentioning, like your love and attraction for psychology at the end really serving you well, because in all those roles of sales, raising capital, business development. It's really about like the connection with people and psychology, and your MBA in finance for Wharton. So it's amazing, like everything that came and aligned throughout your journey.
I would say
Fantastic.
that, yeah, no, I mean, it really makes a lot of sense. Some people, it's a non-traditional path. A lot of people don't choose this path. Most finance people go sort of straight finance from day one. They're bankers, investment bankers straight out of college, and maybe major in finance or accounting or econ or something like that. And they only do that. I think that the less traditional path that my educational background and then professional experience has taken really has created a very rich body of experiences and skills and combination that is a tremendous competitive advantage for me professionally.
Yeah, this is what I was going to tell you. Like you have like really like a unique branding
Yeah.
on the marketplace. So this is like great for you. And for a lot of people, like raising capital or business development is like it's scary, and you are thriving in it. So I would love you to share with us what is the most rewarding aspect of your job today, but also what is the most challenging aspect of your role? Because really, even if like we enjoy our job, there is always like the rewarding, but there is always like some challenge. So I would love you to share your perspective on those points.
So I'm not big on administrative work, you know, paperwork and everything like that. And some of the follow-up grunt work that is required of any salesperson, no matter how senior you are, because I'm in a very senior role now, no matter how senior you are, you know, there's a certain amount of admin and grunt work that you have to do that just won't, that just will not, sorry, my dog Taco wants to participate in the conversation right now.
What is his name or name?
This is Taco. This is Taco. And
Taco.
he's very old and he's kind of agitated. So he insisted on being here, else he wasn't going to be quiet.
This is awesome.
He has to make an appearance. But you know, we're all working from home. You have to adapt. But at any rate, what was I saying? Oh, the most challenging aspect is really just the administrative follow-up, you know, chasing all the little details. In order to be successful in any sort of sales or business development role, you really have to be quite detail oriented and chase down a lot of little balls and threads. And sometimes you have a lot of threads kind of hanging and dangling, and you have to, if you don't sweep all of those up or tie all those off, you will not be successful, because follow-up is key. And that is a big differentiator in the market. You know, so many people tell me, oh, I'm so glad you followed up, or I'm surprised you followed up, or most people don't follow up. And so that kind of thing is really, really important. And following up is a little different from admin, but it does create like a list of pending tasks, right, that really have to be chased after. And that's actually probably the most difficult thing, because it's less exciting and it can get tedious, and it can be very, you know, it can feel like a lot of busy work. You know, one of the most rewarding is just dealing with people. I mean, as a trained psychologist, you know, I just find people endlessly fascinating. And I think that a lot of the misconception about sales is that people think, oh, you just need to talk a good game and have a good personality to be in sales. And that's just the basic requirement, right? But people who, I see people who have those qualities get hired for sales jobs and flame out all the time, because one, they're not good listeners. They're good talkers, but not good listeners. And that's what the psychology brings to bear for me is, you know, I am a great talker, but I'm also a really good listener. And you have to not just sort of learn how to be quiet and just let the other person talk, but you have to hear what they are saying and interpret it, and hear what they are not saying, and forecast and fill in the blanks and meet a need, even, and identify needs that they haven't even expressed. That's really the trick. Really good business developers and relationship developers hear not only what you're saying, but what you're not saying, and can keep peeling back the onion to uncover needs, desires, fears, you know, because everyone that you're selling to, whether it's an institutional sale or a personal sale, is a person still, right? This is something that really has not been disintermediated by technology, which is another exciting thing about it. This is a job that still requires a human person to perform. And so I think that the most rewarding part is that people element and really sort of unlocking the code of any individual person and meeting them where they are and delivering. And then the least favorite is just chasing down all the little balls and tying up, crossing on the T's and dotting all the I's. That's essential, but it's not super fun.
Yeah. And you're right. At the end, like, no matter the advance in technology, business will always remain like relational. Like technology is going like to help us, but that at the end, what makes the difference is like this human connection. And I love like all those key elements you mentioned in like closing the sales and building the relationship and really like connecting to your client.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your secrets with us, Brigette, this morning.
And my secret weapon is also Taco. He's closed quite a bit of business.
Yeah, it's true, because I think like dogs and baby, when you see someone with a dog and your baby, you're always like super, like the person is already like your best friend. There is something special with babies and pets.
Yeah.
And we started with your unconventional educational path, your rich career, and at this moment you're mainly immersed in like the finance world. And let's be honest, there is still few women in this industry and few people of color in this industry. So I know when I was doing my research that you are super passionate and involved in advancing change in the industry. So I would love you to share your vision, your expectation, because you are currently the global chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Council of the CAIA Association. So why this role and what is your goals with this position?
So the CAIA Association is the Chartered Alternative Investment Association, and it's essentially the CAIA designation is a credential you earn by taking 2 exams that demonstrate proficiency in alternative investments. That includes hedge funds, private equity, real estate, timberland, all kinds of sort of esoteric investments that are outside of the traditional stock or bond investments that people are typically familiar with. And I earned this designation because I felt that the alternative investment industry had better growth potential and better return profile, frankly, than traditional long only investment vehicles, such as the ones that I covered when I was on the trading floor in New York. And so I had an interest in that. I earned this designation, started participating, and became part of the local steering committee when I moved to South Florida. Now, when we had a global awakening during the pandemic around racial injustice that called attention to some of the dynamics around race in our country that some people were not aware of, a lot of organizations decided to commit or recommit or deepen their commitment to furthering the cause of racial equity. And CAIA was one of those organizations. And I don't want to sell myself short, but unfortunately, there just weren't like a lot of Black people active in CAIA. And I had met the president of CAIA, Bill Kelly, great guy, previously in my role as a member of the South Florida Steering Committee. And he invited me to participate in this project as they started to explore how they were going to play a role as an educational, professional, credentialing body to hopefully creating more opportunity for diverse people to participate in the alternative industry. And it's really interesting because CAIA is a global organization. And so when we talk about diversity, we talk about it globally. That means different things in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and in the US, which are the 4 sort of major geographies where we operate. And so we've had a lot of conversation internally just about how do we even start this conversation on a global scale? And do we have a long sort of a timeline that says we're going to focus on the US and then we're going to focus on Asia or Europe or whatever? Because people think about these issues differently and they play out differently in different geographies. People identify themselves differently. People have different attitudes about it. So it's been a really interesting and cool, expansive role. I'm learning a lot. And the commitment basically in the mission of the DEI Council or Advisory Board is to really advise CAIA on what they can do better. So one of the things that we're pushing for is just more diversity on panels. You'll see a panel about, let's say, blockchain. What is its role in your investment portfolio? And it'll have 4 blockchain experts and a moderator, and every single one of them will be a white guy, every single one, as though no Black people or women are in part of this conversation. And I can think of several right off the top of my head in this moment who should be on that panel, who are experts who've been in it since day one. And, the reason for that is that people tend to staff speaker panels from their personal networks. And so that's a self-fulfilling prophecy and a cycle that gets perpetuated when you have just a bunch of white guys in the room. They only know people like them to staff these panels. So that's one of the things. Another thing is partnering with organizations that are developing talent, Black and brown talent, to enter the industry and providing support financially and from a curriculum standpoint, because we have such a rich curriculum and such resources in that regard. We're doing a partnership with the organization led by Troy Prince called Wall Street Bound, which is fantastic. And then in addition to that, just, having conversations that empower people with information and perspective, because CAIA is based, frankly, in Massachusetts, out in the country somewhere. And their staff wasn't very diverse. And so they're starting with just, more intentionally recruiting a diverse staff and allowing people to work remotely. Because, for example, you couldn't get me to move there. No way, right? So the only way I would work for an organization like that is if they let me work remotely. But I'm not moving to the country in Massachusetts. So, that's part of the issue, right? Is that, some of these organizations that are tucked away in places that don't have diverse populations or where people don't want to move to, you have to offer maybe more flexible working arrangements to attract and retain that talent. So it's been really exciting. There was a recent press release announcing the formation of the board, my role, and the elevation of Debbie McLean to their head of diversity and inclusion, just to sort of make this a more institutional, sustainable effort on their part. And I really applaud their efforts.
Awesome. And I love it. And there is indeed like a lot of work to do. So I'm sure that you will be able to see like the impact and the difference of your action.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when I studied like you were super young, and you corrected me, you are young, but indeed not super young, because you have already like a rich body of experience. And for this reason, I would love, and all industries are currently changing. So if there is younger professionals who are listening, or maybe professionals already established in their career, but they feel stuck. So if we think of the younger professional who would love to fast track his career in the finance world, or maybe someone who feels stuck in their career, what would be your advice? Because you were able like to build this rich and dynamic career, to really spice it up and speed it up for like.
Well, I'm a big fan of continuing your education, right? So throughout my career, I had 1 master's degree, then I ended up with 2, then I got the CAIA designation. I'm actually working on another certification now, TBD. I don't want to announce it until I just in case I fail the test. But it's not going to happen. But I think you want to constantly be refreshing your skills and keeping an open mind. And, staying current with what the trends are in your field and where things are going. You want to run to where the ball is going to be, not to where where it was hit from, right? So I think that's a hockey analogy. You skate to where the puck is going to be, right? To where the puck is going. And that's, I think, really what's important, is to look out 5-10 years, not only where you want to be based on your current knowledge and understanding of the industry, but where is the industry going to be in 5 or 10 years? And where do you want to be in that context, right? I've seen really, and I saw this on the trading floor a lot when Lehman went bankrupt. The job I had on the trading floor has really become disintermediated by technology. The margins in the equity trading business have been decimated consistently over time. There's not a lot of money left for bonus pool, for salaries, et cetera. I don't think it's a promising career to go into now with the goal of being a desk head and being a managing director and retiring at a bank the way some of the people who I worked for were able to do. And so, you could see that writing on the wall while you were there. That's why I left that business. Also, I got tired of being at the desk at 5:30 every morning and being chained to it all day. But it was a great training, and I don't regret a minute of it. I learned so much in that role and actually made a couple of friends. So I don't regret doing that, but I'm really glad that I left that business. And part of the reason I did was because it was very clear to me there was no long-term future for me if I really, really wanted to grow. And so you have to identify what's growth, but also don't be too caught up in what's trendy. For example, everybody's talking tech, tech, tech. Well, tech as an industry is quite interesting and exciting. Everything is tech enabled now. So, you don't have to go into tech. What about consumer products? It's all still tech enabled, right? Everyone doesn't need to learn how to code. If you're learning how to code now with the hopes of being senior, sure, it's a useful skill, but most people outsource that now. So that's its own specialty, coding. It can facilitate your career, but it's not going to make or break you. So you have to really decide, where you want to be based on where you think the industry is going to be, and continuously educate yourself and develop new skills throughout your career. As long as your brain is working, keep stepping new facts and new understanding into it.
Okay. And I love it. And what part we're mentioning, is really understanding where the wind is blowing in terms of what is becoming hot, and also understanding where you want to play. And because as a coach, this is one of my role, to help people accelerate and speed up their career. And a lot of time, which is great for me because for this reason they need a coach, but we don't have this vision of really, we are not intentional. And for this reason, sometimes we feel stuck because we are not taking the right steps. So I really love the different insights that you've been sharing. And aside your rich career, you also have other rich and interesting life experiences. And I discovered that you were part of the Obama re-election campaign in 2012. Yeah. So I would love to know, what did you learn about this experience? And since it seems that you're always on the move and always reinventing yourself, are you maybe at some point considering having a bigger role in the politics arena?
It's so interesting you ask that because I'm such a political junkie. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and my mother worked for a U.S. congressman for about 30 years. That's the job she retired from.
Okay.
And so politics is in my blood, but I am too honest to be a politician, I think. I would be always in trouble for just speaking my mind, and I don't know how effective I would be. But I do enjoy being politically involved, and being a fellow for the Obama campaign in 2012 was one of the great honors of my life. At the time, I was still working for myself and had the ability to be flexible and devote as much time to that campaign as I liked. And I learned so much. One of the really interesting things I learned was how little people vote, or how few people vote. It was really disheartening, but it's also very encouraging to learn that you can play a role as an organizer in motivating people to vote. I mean, there were plenty of people who didn't plan to vote, whom I was able to persuade, our team were able to persuade to vote through the GOTV, what they call Get Out the Vote campaign. Those things actually work. Knocking on people's doors really work. I also worked for the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. We know how that wrapped up. And I learned a lot there and wasn't very surprised when she did not win. But it also opened my eyes to how easily persuaded or misled people are if you hit the right note. Now, I knew this, from studying psychology, but because I don't practice psychology and didn't go on to become a therapist and a licensed practitioner, sometimes I still am surprised by how, if you cater to someone's, deepest fears or desires, you can really bring them along to your way of thinking. And hopefully people use that for good, but, I've seen it go both ways. Also, Obama had the best organized campaign I've ever seen. The Hillary campaign wasn't nearly as well organized. And I think that contributed tremendously to that campaign's success and ability to get out the vote. They really knew what they were doing, had a great, what we call CRM, customer relationship management system, where they really kept track of individual people and their voting preferences and the amount of contact we had with them. It was easy to use. And that was a key technological tool to empowering people on the ground like me to reach voters and persuade them to vote.
Wow, super interesting. So today we learn about like insights to be a great salesperson, insight on presidential campaigns. We are like super rare. Not everybody is able to be part of those. So thank you very much. And as you were mentioning, Brigette, there is like really the fine line between like influencing people and manipulating people.
Right.
And for this reason, like we really need always like to be aware of where we are and where we stand, to not fall into manipulation, because yes, people are easily manipulated.
They really are. It's remarkable.
And we are coming to an end to our time together. But generally, for my last question, I like to go either like to imagine, to dream, and so we could close on a light note. The world is reopening. Yeah. And so I would love to know, what are like the countries that you have on your bucket list to start traveling again?
So that's a great question. I really want to explore Asia, specifically South Asia more. I mean, my heart goes out to our friends in India. I have friends who live in India now, and it's a heartbreaking situation with COVID there. So it'll probably be a while before I'll be able to travel there, but it's at the top of my bucket list. So given that, I would say Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, don't think I can manage that in one trip unless I take a month off from work. But those are places that I really, really, really want to visit. I have friends in all of those places. So as soon as I can identify a block of time, I'm going there. But I already have some travel planned. I'm going to the Caribbean for a bachelorette party and a wedding soon. And later this fall, rather, and being fully vaccinated, I'm ready to go. And then of course I'll pop back over to Europe, Paris and London. I'll go there. But I've been there many times already. And then I have some friends in Africa. A friend just married someone from Ghana, so hopefully I'll get to visit them and do that. So I've pretty well traveled. I've been in a lot of different places, probably about 40 countries. Wow. And so I, intend to add a lot more to that list.
This is amazing. So I can see you have already your planning is ready to go. Yeah. And there is indeed so many amazing places to visit. So on this note of dreaming, evasion, traveling, and getting back our freedom, we are closing our time together. But thank you very much, Brigette, again, for all your insight about how to win our career, how to be good in the business development world or raising capital, and also those insights for winning presidential campaign. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Merci beaucoup for having me, Sandy.
I was mentioning that I knew also you speak French. Merci à toi, Brigette.
Okay.
And for our audience, see you next week for another encounter at Glassbreakers Café.
À la prochaine.
À la prochaine. If you enjoyed today's episode of Glassbreakers Café, please subscribe and share with your friends on social media. Also, be sure to follow me, your host, Cindy Montgenie, on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. If there is any special guest or special topic you would like us to address, please drop me a note at cindy@newskiesnation.com. Thanks a lot for joining us today. And remember, no one can predict the future, but we still need to prepare for it. See you next week.